Hi, I'm Daniel Stevens, the Associate Director of the Scholars Initiative here at the Museum of the Bible. Usually I'm working with early Christian texts and New Testaments, but today there's nobody here, and so I guess that makes me the Lonesome Curator. Hello! So our manuscript today, and for the next couple of videos that I'm in at least, is going to be this one right here, sometimes called the Bodmer Psalms, or Bodmer 24, or Ralph's 2110, or here at the museum, just the humble name of manuscript 170. You don't really need to know any of those things, but the important thing to know is that this is a manuscript of the Greek translation of the Psalms, sometimes referred to as the Septuagint Psalms. The first question I'm going to talk about today is, why on earth is there a Greek Psalms at all? And what is this term that's often used, the Septuagint, when talking about things like this? Because, as you well know, the Psalms were written initially in Hebrew. So how did we end up with this? How did we end up with an ancient Greek translation of the Psalms? And for that, since we don't have newspapers from the time, we have to rely on literary sources from a little bit later. There are a couple that preserve the tradition, but the main one that most of those go back to is a document called the Letter of Aristeas. So the version I'm going to give is mostly based off of that. We can't say for certain how much of it is historically accurate. Probably a lot of the details aren't quite right, but it gives the story that was believed throughout most of antiquity. So in the Letter of Aristeas, it talks about the king of Egypt in the Hellenistic period, Ptolemy II, called Philadelphus because he married his sister. And he was building up the Library of Alexandria, this famous, or now famous, collection of, in his mind, all the books in the world, or all the books worth reading in the Greek world, really. Through some means, he was persuaded to include the law of the Hebrews, the books of Moses, the Torah. However, there was a problem. The books of Moses, the Torah, was written in Hebrew, but this was really a Greek project, and people in Egypt rarely could speak Hebrew. It is certain that Ptolemy would not have known how to, and so he needed something else. He needed a translation. According to the story, then, he sends to the high priest in Israel at the time, and the high priest is thrilled by this prospect. He wants to cooperate as much as possible, so what he does is he takes 6 men from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, scribes, well-trained both in Hebrew and Greek, well-trained scribes in the understanding of the law, and he sends all 72 of them over to Alexandria in Egypt to begin this project. They are received with great fanfare by Ptolemy, and then they are set to their work. Of course, various stories arose about this, various myths about how they all worked separately but had exactly the same translations. We're not going to go into that, but these men, as the story goes, made their work. They translated the 5 books of Moses, and they collected their translation. They made them into what would have been probably 5 scrolls and presented them. This translation work came to be known as the translation of the 72, because 72 people did the work and they translated it. Not the most creative name, but it tells you what you get. This often got shortened, or at least has since been gotten shortened to the translation of the 70, because 72 is slightly harder to say than 70, so why not round down? It's close. And that word 70 in Latin, which became the language of the West, was Septuaginta. From that we get the English Septuagint. Over a course of time, people stopped saying the translation of the 70, and they just started saying the Septuagint, or nowadays even the LXX from the Roman numerals for that. That properly only refers to the 5 books of the Torah. However, often in kind of an imprecise way, the word Septuagint is used to describe the entire set of Greek translations, or rather the main set of Greek translations of the Hebrew scriptures. Because after those books, those 5 books were translated, over the next century or two, and we don't know exactly by whom, and we don't know exactly where or exactly when, the rest of the books of Hebrew scriptures were translated from Hebrew and a little Aramaic into Greek as well. And that represents the Old Greek translation of the Psalms, which we have here. This Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures became the main book of worship, the main used book of worship at least, for the Jews in diaspora, so out in Egypt and really all around the Mediterranean, if they didn't have good access to knowledge of Hebrew. Also, in the first centuries of the church, once Christianity became a movement, they adopted the Hebrew scriptures, but they adopted them most frequently in this Greek translation. So for a brief period of time, the book of worship used by both synagogue and church would have been the Greek Psalms. And we'll go and talk a bit more about this manuscript of the Greek Psalms in the next video.
If you like what you've been seeing on our Lonely Curator videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.